Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing Dwarf, a small worker placement game designed by Lee Broderick and published by Dragon Dawn. Alright, so this is the setup for Dwarf, and basically the object of this game is to contribute the most to your dwarven society, and you're going to do that by amassing the most resources. The three resources that typically count are gold, so the orange ones, steel, so the blue. The gray is iron. It's the most common resource and it's really only used for tiebreakers. And then you have items, which are these purple ones. There are fewer of the cubes because they're just harder to get. Also, once you craft your fourth item, you can trigger the end of the game. There are two ways for the game to end, are for you to craft 4 items or for the mountain deck to run out of cards. But at the end of the game, you're going to count up your gold, your steel, and your items, and whoever has the majority in 2 out of 3 of those items is going to be the winner of the game. If there's a tie, then you look at the number of medals a person has. So these little green tokens are medals that you win for defending the mountain against enemies, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then if there's still a tie, you look at how much iron you have. Some resources you can get by going to cards. So this is a gold seam right here. You would go here to get gold. This one is an iron seam, so you would get iron. And the symbology on the bottom of the card is basically telling you if there's a worker here, you're going to get 3 iron. If there's a worker here, you're going to get 1 gold. This little white symbol just means that you take it from the supply. In addition to these 9 cards that start out as just gold and iron seams, but it's going to change in just a moment, you also have these special action cards over here on the left. So basically, normally to do the action on a card, you just place 1 worker on that card. However, special actions require either 2 workers or some of your medals and a worker. But these will let you do things like adjust which cards are visible on the mine, or trade in a certain combination of resources for items. Or in this case for Apprentice, it allows you to place a worker on a space that another player is occupying, so you might want to do that if you really, really need it. What's interesting about this game is that the spaces that you have to place workers in the very first turn will not at all look like what you have on the last turn. So we're going to go through a turn, but each of these cards in the mountain deck is going to cover one of these cards with something new. And also, every time you do a special action, on the back of those, there's a location that will enter the map after you perform the special action on the other side of the card. So we have this sort of shifting setup that will force us to react to what's coming out and to think about how to work our current mine in pursuit of our goals. All right, so let's talk through a turn. We're going to talk through a solo turn because, of course, I will tell you there are 3 different solo bots. I'm going to show you just what the basic one works like, and then we'll talk about the higher difficulty levels. But essentially what's going to happen is, in a solo game, you're going to do the first phase just like you would in either. You have the mining phase, and that means that you take 2 mountain cards and you place them in corresponding spots in your mine. So you know where to place your starter cards because there's a little orange fill-in on the grid printed at the top of the card. And so you put the card on the space of the grid that is marked in orange. This is also true for mountain cards. So let's say I pull this mountain card. All right, so this one's a dragon. That's not so hot. I'll put it right here. And then this one is Forge Crown. So if we can get some gold, we can put it in the supply and then get an item back. So what's nice about this is that the 2 cards that have come out are cards that are worth talking about because they expand the game mechanically a little bit. So in a multiplayer game, Dwarf is semi-cooperative because you will need to defend against enemies that take your resources away every turn or prevent you from doing other desirable actions. So the effect of this dragon card is different depending on whether the card is defended or undefended. And one of the tensions of the game is deciding whether you're going to put your own worker here to defend, which means you're not collecting the resources that you need to win the game, or if you're going to try to make somebody else go there, but maybe they also don't care, so you risk losing stuff. So enemies are a persistent problem to deal with, especially because you don't really know when they're going to get covered over by another card. You can maybe do a special action to influence that, but then you have to give up 2 workers, and that's a big deal as well. Here we have Forge Crown. So to get items, you need cards that allow you to do that. This one allows you to pay 3 gold to the supply to get an item back. Other items are going to require steel. But in order to turn iron, which is the most common resource, into steel, you're also going to need cards to come out that actually allow you to convert those resources. So you're constantly watching for what is available for me to make, what can I work towards, but then of course things can change because stuff is going to come off the mountain. So after the mining phase, then you start to take your turns. The way this works is these are little helper meeples. They don't necessarily come out on the board. there's a card called Get Help that lets you play extra workers, but usually you only have 2. And in every solo game, the first turn is taken by the AI. So let's say the AI is blue. How do I know where to put the AI worker? Well, I know because I take the second card that I drew from the mountain, and then I look at this black meeple on the card, and I put the AI where the black meeple is on the grid. If for some reason the black meeple space does not work, then you use the white meeple space as your alternative. Then I'm going to get to put my worker somewhere. So let's say that I want to also get some gold. And what that's going to do is that actually determines where the AI is going to go on their next turn. So once again, I'm going to look for the black meeple first. And there's nothing on this iron seam card. You can only have 1 worker per card. So here's the white meeple. I couldn't have put another meeple over here. Fortunately, you look at the black one first. So you have this black meeple. I know that I'm going to go to the top middle. That's where the AI is going to go. And then I'll choose to go somewhere else. Let's say that I am going to defend against the dragon because I don't want to lose what little gold I'm going to pick up. So once you've done your mountain phase, you select your actions. One thing that is possible in the game is to manipulate the AI so that you can make them defend when you want to go get items. So I could have done something like put my first meeple up here to force the AI down onto this card, and then taken a gold myself on my second action. So when you're playing with the AI, you control where they go for the second action. And that means that you need to be strategic about where you put your meeples, not just for yourself, but also because it's going to impact directly what the AI will do. As you can see, having 2 workers makes things pretty tight. So this dragon is going to mean that I only get 1 gold for the whole turn. The other thing to think about is don't forget these special actions require 2 meeples. So what's risky about that is that I would have to give up an entire turn to do one of these. And that's also something that you want to think about. The good news is that by defeating this dragon, I'm going to get a medal, and you can spend 4 medals to only put 1 meeple on one of these. So the medals do eventually do something nice for you. So now that we've selected our actions, we're going to do action resolution. So the order that you would do those in is if I had a Get Help card in here, which allows me to put extra meeples out, I would do that right away. Then you defend. So this dragon would attack. Since I have a defender there, I will take this meeple back, and I'm also going to grab a medal. After that, our workers that are in the mines are all going to get stuff. So I'm going to get 1 gold, and the AI is going to get 3 iron and 1 gold. And then if somebody had forged something, it's at the end of the round that you actually do the forging. So if one of us had enough resources to forge a crown and put a meeple there, then that's what we would have done. And that's an entire turn. Basically, after you've done all your actions, you pull all your workers back. You start pulling more mountain cards off for another round, and you start it all again. And once again, the game ends either when somebody manages to craft 4 items or when you run out of mountain cards to draw. What's interesting about the AI, however, is that there are 3 different levels. The basic level pretty much allows you to push the AI around. So basically, depending on where I put my second meeple, I can control at least where the AI's second worker will go, which means that I can use the AI to defend, I can make the AI go onto spaces that don't make sense for them, all the while laughing and getting some of the best stuff for myself. However, there are 2 more AI levels that do make things a little bit more difficult. So the second level AI gains medals not only when they do a defense action, but also when you take a special, and they win automatically if they collect 12 medals. So basically, because you're going to be tempted to always use the AI to defend, the AI on higher levels will punish you a little bit for that and kind of force you to rethink it, because you don't want to just push the AI out there to defend, and then have them automatically win the game because they hit the medal threshold. On the third level, you have the same issue with the medals where they can win if you let them accumulate too many, but also you have to put the AI's workers on a usable card if at all possible. When you're competing against the lower level AIs, you might do something like say, haha, you don't have 3 gold and neither do I. I'm going to make you go over here to Forge Crown where you can't actually do anything and you're going to waste your worker. So with the third level AI, you're no longer allowed to do that. The AI will place on a spot where they can actually achieve something. So your very lowest level bot has no clue and you can really push it around. And then by the third level, you have to be careful to not let it get too many medals for defending, because it can win that way and you cannot. And also it has to be put onto usable spaces, so it adds another layer of thought when you're considering where to put your worker, because you also have to think about where their worker is going to go in response to your choice. And that is an overview of how you play Dwarf. All right, so now for some final thoughts. I think there are a lot of things to appreciate in the design of Dwarf. There are some cool ideas that went into this game that I will highlight now. So I thought the concept of cards coming off the mountain and changing the landscape that you were working with, the mindscape, was interesting, and it was stressful and also something that forced moves out of you to know that cards that you really, really wanted to keep on display could disappear at any time. And of course, there are some special actions that can help you manipulate that. But you don't know when they're going to show up or whether you're going to have the workers ready to accommodate using a special ability. So there's definitely a lot of surprise tactical decision making there, and I appreciate it. And sometimes that made the game fun and exciting. Sometimes it didn't, which we'll get to in a moment. I also thought that the solo mode was clever. I do like it when a solo mode pushes you to think about what the AI is going to do and try to anticipate and deal with it. So there was an extra puzzle layer added to this one, because the first AI meeple placement is determined by the second card that comes off the mountain. But the second is determined by where you put your first meeple. And so thinking about the right balance between what's going to work for you and what's going to work for the AI was enjoyable, and I did like it. I also like that the AI gets smarter as you go up the levels, so that you're discouraged from just using the AI to block the bad guys who are taking your resources every turn, because if they get too many medals, then they'll automatically win, which means that you can't just use the AI as a meat shield while you collect resources. And I like that in the final level of the game, you get to a point where you also can't just put the AI on spots that it can't actually use. Because in the first level, it's kind of fun. Oh, I can put the AI in this place that isn't even any good for it. I can waste the AI's second meeple every time if I want to. And there's a certain pleasure in that. But I did like that the levels got more challenging and prevented you from doing that, and made you think about the game a little harder. So there's a lot about the game that's good. However, Dwarf does not quite do it for me. And I think the smaller reason is that sometimes when cards are coming off the mountain, they don't come in an order that really makes you feel like you're making progress in the game, or things are going well. A lot of times you might feel stuck. Sometimes there's just so many resource-sucking enemies coming down that it feels really frustrating. Or you might really, really need to make steel and the card just isn't there. And having to wait on the whim of the deck for that and for access to that could be really frustrating. So conceptually, I think it was a cool idea, and I'm glad that Lee Broderick tried it. I don't know if that's something that I would really want in a worker placement game, having played this. So, my gameplay experiences with this have been decent. Sometimes plays are a little bit boring. Sometimes plays end up making you feel a bit stuck, depending on the pattern in which the cards show up. But the real issue for me with this game, I think, is that, the goal to win is to get the majority in 2 out of 3 main resources, and then iron and metals are tiebreakers. And I found that frustrating because it just wasn't really a satisfying win condition. I didn't feel like I was building up towards anything particularly exciting. I didn't get a particular thrill out of changing iron into steel, for example. And I think I just wanted to feel a little bit more tension and to have a goal that felt a little bit more high stakes. Also, I see the reasoning for putting enemies on the mountain that you have to, defend against, and especially I think in the multiplayer game, it gives you that semi-co-op, do I protect everyone's resources, but, it's because I really need to protect myself, do I try to push somebody else to handle the defense for me? I get it. But it was also really unsatisfying to have to get yet another medal because I had to defend against the dragon this turn, and then I got another resource that I didn't want when I was looking at all the resources that I really did want in order to win. And it just kind of led to a lot of turns that didn't quite feel satisfying. And again, this isn't a game that was bad, but it's not a game that, how when you play a game, you get really hooked. You feel that moment of connection where the game gives you a bit of a rush, and then it's I want to set that up again. Oh, let me try that again. I gotta try this. I gotta try that. And you kind of have that, even if it's a short-term addiction to the game. I never really got that with this one. I never felt oh gosh, I have to set this up again right now and try it again. And that's what's missing from Dwarf for me. That may be a matter of personal taste. So if you looked at the overview, it may be more for you than it is for me. But I give it a 6 out of 10. Thanks for watching, and happy gaming.